Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the First Fridays Art Talk. Tonight, we're talking about the photograph as art, and I'm your host, Sarah Hodges-Kalisnik. I don't know if I've said it in past art talks, but I am a photographer and a photo historian, so I'm super excited to welcome our guests tonight to talk about photography and all things photograph. It is the Flash Photo Festival this month, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But before we get started, lots of things going on to remind you about tonight. It's so exciting. Usually I like to start out by highlighting an event to check out, but there's honestly so much going on tonight for First Fridays that you really just need to check the website, firstfridayswinnipeg.org. Check out all the events. It is Design Month as well, which is highlighted as one of the events for First Fridays. Design Month is a collaboration of the Winnipeg Architecture Foundation, Storefront Manitoba, and the Flash Photo Festival. So there's all kinds of things to check out. And their opening actually for Design Month is going on until 10 p.m. tonight at 245 Portage. It's a debut of an exhibition called Of All Possible Futures. So that is one highlight. I lied. I'm going to highlight that one. But definitely go check out all the First Fridays things. There's all kinds of things going on. As well, make sure you check if there's any mask requirements or things like that in place. So to start us off, I'd like to acknowledge that First Fridays was started to encourage people to come to the Exchange District in Winnipeg. We acknowledge that it is located within Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Nahiawak, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Our water here in Winnipeg has been taken from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation on Treaty 3 territory. Our hydroelectric power comes from dam projects in Treaty 5 territory, mostly without prior and informed consent. We recognize that those joining this talk online may also come from different traditional territories. We would like to work towards greater understanding and acting on how to decolonize art, artistic practice, public discourse, and ourselves. One final reminder that if you want to comment or ask any questions at any point throughout the talk tonight, there's a little button under the screen that says join the chat, and that'll take you directly to YouTube where you can type your questions in. I think it comes up on the right-hand side on YouTube. And we will get to those just as quick as we can in the course of the talk. And one other thing, sorry. We've finally gotten a podcast together for First Fridays Winnipeg as well. So the past art talks that we've done since September, you'll be able to find we'll drop a link in the chat there, but it's First Fridays Art Talk libsyn.com. So if you feel inclined to check out some of our past talks, please do. Okay, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our first guest. We have two photographers joining us tonight, two artists. Tim Smith is a Manitoba-based photographer who spent 15 years documenting life on the prairies, including 13 years photographing the Hutterites, insular Anabaptists that live communally on colonies in Canada and the United States. His work is among the broadest and most extensive visual documentations of their culture ever produced and has been exhibited across North America, Europe, and in Israel. In addition to long-term documentary work, he covers assignments for a variety of editorial and commercial clients in the prairies and occasionally further afield. Tim's work has garnered several awards, including 2 National Newspaper Awards and a Judge's Special Recognition for the prestigious Pictures of the Year International Community Awareness Award. Tim is also a featured exhibition of the Flash Photographic Festival this year. This is a new feature of the festival. So the featured exhibitions, the works were selected by a jury that included Sam Bardman, Hugh Conacher, Leona Herzog, Diana Thornycroft, and the artist will be paid Carfax fees as well. And his exhibition is called In the World, but Not of It, and it takes place at Dawn's Photo on Portage. So we'll take a look at Tim's work. Welcome here, Tim.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, can we see the first slides? Oh, here we go. So Tim, maybe you can tell me, have these photographs been taken over the last 13 years, was it, or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I started this project in 2009, somewhat by accident when I stumbled upon Dearborn Hutterite colony while out looking for photos for the newspaper I work for in Brandon, the Brandon Sun. I saw some women working in the garden, so I pulled over, stopped in, and asked if I could take some photos for the paper, really knowing nothing about Hutterite culture at the time. And I just quickly became fascinated with this culture that I knew nothing about and that I had some preconceived notions about that were easily dispelled. I just kept going back, and I thought, oh, maybe I'd take 6 months or a year and try and work on a long-term project. And 13 years later, and here I am. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, in that way, it reminds me of some of the great kind of editorial work, some of the great documentary photos that have become art, have kind of entered the canon of art history. I was reminded of Eugene Smith's Country Doctor photo essay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that
exactly.
one, I mean, but that one wasn't 13 years.
Right, yeah, but beautiful.
Yeah. So do you think, I mean, we're kind of talking about the photograph as art tonight, and I think that's something that maybe binds all artists together, is this curious nature that also editorial photographers definitely need to be inquisitive.
For sure. Yeah.
So maybe as we're looking at the photographs, is there anything you want to say about any of them? I'm kind of interrupting the slideshow.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain ones that I'll probably discuss when we kind of get into the questions and that, but in terms of kind of photography as art and how this fits into the art landscape, it's interesting because I have very strong feelings on opposite sides. I mean, I very much feel that photography is an absolute integral discipline of art, and it's so important as a discipline of art. And then at the same time, I feel very uncomfortable myself in the art world. It does feel very familiar or unfamiliar to me. It does feel a little bizarre because that's not my background. That's not how, when I started this, you know, I'm an editorial photographer, a documentary photographer. I never kind of imagined or thought about kind of crossing over into the art world. But I do see the context, and I absolutely see beautiful work that is artwork. But for me, sometimes it almost feels like it's a bit cheating because I just take pictures and they're very truthful pictures in that they're just things going on in front of me and it feels like I don't have the vision and the beautiful artist mind that so many artists have. But but there are visually similar things I guess I look for in the work because I look for beautiful moments and things like that. And I play with, as you can see, I play with color a lot. Color and light are really important to me.
Yeah, I pulled some quotes as I was preparing for our discussion today because especially, you know, meeting you, Tim, and a documentary photographer, I was reminded of John Sarkowski and the New Document show when photography kind of first became accepted, quote unquote, as you will, as an art, right? Kind of first took the stage in a major museum. And so I pulled a quote from him. He said, "Creative photography is not dependent upon museums' approval. It belongs in our museums to elevate it, not itself, but those who look at it and see it." And thinking about truth, I'm curious, can you speak to that a little bit more? Like, maybe a better question is, why do you feel like photography is the right medium for your vision or for what you want to say?
I mean, it's the right medium for my vision because I have no artistic talent outside of photography. Some days I don't have artistic talent even when it comes to photography, but it's the right medium for me because I guess because of my journalist background. So it's coming from what I see, it's coming from what I live and I witness, as opposed to creativity coming from my head. So yes, there's creativity in how I take the picture and how I decide to frame it, chasing the light, things like that. Um, but I'm capturing moments that I'm seeing in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that indexical quality that lends an air of truth to the photograph is what's drawn me to photography as well, and I think what we keep coming to. But then it reveals something to us, I feel like, that's more than experiencing the moment, right? Because it captures everything. It's that kind of alchemical fingerprint of the moment. And
absolutely,
yeah.
And it is just a moment. I mean, I get a little uneasy with that. Truth, yes. Honesty, yes. But these are moments of truth. These are small frames of truth within a much bigger context. My work is not the definitive work on Hutterites. It doesn't say everything about Hutterite culture, anything like that. For me, it's just a gateway. It's an introduction so that people can learn more about the society, about this culture, about documentary photography. I think it's an accessible way into learning more about a community.
Mm-hmm. Do you think did you start producing this work as an editorial project, or was it always kind of different in some way?
It was 100% an editorial documentary project. I approached it differently than I do my daily editorial work. A lot slower, a lot more methodical, with certain constraints in terms of the equipment I was using in that, like self restraints. But I did approach it very much from the editorial standpoint, with plans of publishing it in newspapers or magazines and things like that, and really kind of crossed into the art world by chance when I was asked to do an exhibition for the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba. And that's kind of what really brought me into starting to exhibit the work and getting grants to continue the work and so forth.
All right. I do want to pause and remind anyone that if you have a question about Tim's work or Tim as a photographer or photography in general, please post it in the chat. There should be a join the chat button somewhere near your video screen. And now I lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you a follow-up question. But I do have, so I have another Sarkowski quote that I pulled because I thought it fit really well with what we had talked about previously. And he said, painting was difficult, expensive, and precious. And it recorded what was known to be important. Photography was easy, cheap, and ubiquitous. And it recorded anything, shop windows and sod houses and family pets and steam engines and unimportant people. And once made objective and permanent, immortalized in a picture, those trivial things took on importance. So is there a certain thing you look for when you're photographing? Is it, or is it visual?
It's absolutely visual in its context in terms of the moment and kind of looking for that key image that tells the story that can stand on its own as a powerful image, but also work into a broader story. I liked that quote about how he was talking about, like painting being too expensive and things like, yeah, exactly. Like I take thousands of terrible, terrible photos to get to my good ones. So if I was painting canvases, I couldn't afford to do that. If I was shooting film, I couldn't afford to do that. But luckily, in the digital age, I can afford to take a lot of terrible, terrible photos to get to the ones that work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and perhaps paradoxically, though, this is the interesting thing about photography and the history of photography. Like when it was introduced, the box cameras at the end of the 1800s, because everyone could access them, because it opened up photography and art and portraiture to the masses, suddenly it wasn't considered art, right? because it was so available. So there is this interesting paradox. And I want to bring Iyuna into the discussion as well, because he works a little differently too. Did you have any questions for Tim before we look at some of your work, Iyuna?
I don't think I have any questions for him. I think his project is amazing, and yeah, I think I'll have to study it more. Um,
Yeah, I think all the
sorry, I was just gonna say, I was looking through his work earlier, and it's beautiful. It's like so different, so methodical, and like the portraiture in that is beautiful. I just can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah,
thank you
that's
so
why I'm
much.
so excited. You're both very different photographers and very much working in really interesting ways in photography. So I will introduce you formally, Iyuna, before we look at your work. So our other guest for the evening is Iyunade Judah. Iyuna is a Winnipeg-based artist working in film, sound, and photography. He's originally from Ogun, Nigeria, and his work focuses on the reproduction of Black cultural artifacts in photographic and video formats. Iyuna explores themes like masculinity, gender, resistance, and love in a way that revolves around Afrocentrism and imagination. His work primarily focuses on identity and a need for consciousness in African art, and is inspired by our desire to discover African history and art. Iyuna also uses imaginary narratives, such as reincarnation, in his practice to convey a message that might be about sexuality, history, identity, or love. And Iyuna's another featured emerging exhibition of the Flash Photo Festival. His exhibition is curated by Leona Herzog, and it's taking place at Tara Davis Studio at 246 McDermott. And they're open till 8 tonight, I believe. So if you scoot over there really quick after our talk, you might be able to catch Iyuna's show tonight, or go check it out throughout the month. So without further ado, we'll take a look at Iyuna's work. And feel free to set us up, Iyuna, anything you want to say about the work.
I think like my transition from just being like a photographer and being in like a transition from being just a photographer to being an artist was, I would say, was the like evolution of my practice. And I think, I think the idea of like reincarnation defines my work, and the idea to I want to recreate and also want to reimagine like photography, and also reimagine like subjects and their relationships with their relationship with different concepts, like sexuality, masculinity, and especially for like especially on the Black subject, if that makes sense. So my work sort of revolves around I sometimes I don't even know how to fully explain my work, because I think my work is I feel like my work is always evolving, but it still retains the same ideas, but reincarnation is sort of like the vehicle, and reincarnation and reincarnation and also reimagination is sort of like the vehicle that sort of drives my work and my practice, not only in photography but also in film and in sound.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting comment on the nature of photography as well, in a way that's different than Tim's work, but still very much of photography, because photography is capturing that moment, like Tim said, that kind of true moment, and it's one moment of many moments, but in that indexical fingerprint of that moment, it's capturing it forever, right? And it's that uncanny nature, that reproduction of a person or a moment that can get passed around forever, and that that crossover between public and private moments. So I see a lot of that in your work. And Iyuna, we talked about some of your work, you were kind of thinking it's tied to your own personal memory and your own mythology, I guess, in a way, because you were inspired by your grandfather. Is that right?
Yeah, like my self-portrait series is inspired by the idea to like want to recreate, but also like reimagine, because I didn't have any like photographs of how they look like. So I just had to reimagine, and I spoke to someone, I spoke to a family member. They sort of gave me some ideas, and she gave me some names to go by as like for different like subjects. So I came up with different names because she assisted me with that, and she also gave me I guess some poses, and sort of explained how like old photography studios looked like in the 1950s and 60s, where they took most of their pictures, as like teenagers, like 19, 20. So I was around that age when I did some of the pictures. So it was sort of like me like recreating pictures I had never seen.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting, because I, for a project, had been going through my family's photo archives, and I had the benefit of having photographs. But now that you say that, the poses and things remind me a lot of, my family archives as well, from the 1920s and things like that. So I think whatever conversation you had with your grandma, you nailed some of the posing and things like that. You nailed that atmosphere that you were trying to recreate. That's really interesting. There's so much I want to follow up on. Where to start? Do you want to say anything else, Iyuna, before I?
No, you can go
on. Okay, yeah. Well, so one thing I had studied a bunch in my research when I was doing my master's is this idea of family albums, and again, that ability of the photograph to help create memory, right? Or to be used as a mnemonic device to perform memory and share and pass around. And so I guess my question for you, Iyuna, or Tim, you can feel free to jump in as well. What relationship do you think photography has to finding or giving an outlet to voices that have often been overlooked in kind of traditional art canons? It's a big question.
I think because photography is readily available to a lot of people. I think photography has been like a tool for people to sort of show the underrepresented and the misrepresented in a way that humanizes them, and humanizes say their culture, or whatever they believe in. Looking at Tim's work, I think his work does that, because it's I'll say this is like the first time I'm seeing a photo project that humanizes this community, because a lot of people have so many preconceived notions about them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Tim, you can talk to that a little bit, because I think it's different with documentary. Iyuna's working with self-portraiture and working with family and friends. You're working with people who might be strangers to you. So how do you bridge that in the moment and make sure you're, how do you navigate that and think about that voice?
Sure. I mean, in terms of how I navigated, I guess the short answer is this is why it's taken me 13 years. Each one of these communities I go into, each time I go into a new colony, in that kind of the process starts over, where I need to build relationships. I need to build trust, and I need to get to know people, you know, access and intimacy. So I need to gain the access, and then I need to stick around long enough, get to know people long enough that I can gain the intimacy of these moments. And it's extremely important to me because there's a lot of wariness of media portrayals amongst the Hutterite communities, like a lot of underrepresented communities, and there's wariness of stereotypes, and kind of this reductionist, kind of monolithic portrayal of their culture. And my biggest thing is just to try and portray the culture as broadly as possible, so that it doesn't just fall into one-dimensional or stereotypical tropes, and try to break away from that to show how complex this culture is. And I guess the biggest thing I can do to combat negative impressions or getting things wrong is just to keep myself open to dialogue throughout the process, not just when I'm taking the photos, but when the photos are exhibited, if I want to use the photos. The process is open, so if someone wants that I photographed, you know, 5 years later, wants to come and talk to me about that photo, or there's something problematic about it, then I'm open and I'm receptive, and I need to listen to how they feel about the portrayal, because they are the ones in the pictures. So open dialogue, it's a constant communication. It's just not a one-time access and then that's it. I try to be open and keep lines of communication open throughout.
Have some of the communities come out to your openings and exhibitions? Have you had feedback from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a decent amount of exhibitions throughout the prairies. So Brandon, Portage la Prairie, Hamiota, Estevan, Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Alberta, plenty of areas that are surrounded with Hutterite colonies. So Hutterite members have been able to make it out to the shows, and overall the feedback has been great. Most of my friends on the Hutterite communities are not shy to tell me what they think of anything, including my work and that. So if something doesn't match up, they're not afraid to tell me, and that. But the reception has been overwhelmingly positive, and I love it when they can come out and see the exhibitions.
And so then what about you, Iyuna? You're working in a very different way. What are some of the ways that, or why is it important to you to explore these kind of family stories and these both personal and public histories?
I would say it sort of started as like curiosity to know about all of these things, and I was just being like very curious, and I just wanted to just first of all, I wanted to be different, so I felt like being like a curious person, I think I could sort of make it work when it comes to like my art practice. And so I would say it sort of developed from there, and then I started using some of my pictures to sort of like question some of the sort of beliefs that I guess like conflicting beliefs that I had like growing up. I was raised a certain way, and like becoming an adult, and finding other like information, and finding I would say like finding a new thought process was like kind of like challenging. So I sort of use my work to I would say to like highlight those like contradictions, so but it started from like just being curious.
And do you think, I know you work in sound and film as well. So is there a certain thing that draws you to photography in exploring those different narratives and those contradictions?
I started with photography, and so I think like photography is like for me, I'd say was like the main medium for me to express myself. And when I started making films, I wanted my films to be like an extension of like my like photographic like ideas, if that makes sense. But now, like my film practice has sort of expanded into its own, idea or like practice, because I sort of looked into more technology-based arts, and I was also like studying other styles of film and watching different things to shape like my shape my idea of what my films should look like. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And you're currently studying film at U of W, is that right?
Yes.
And you're almost done, so congratulations on almost being done. So so do you have plans to continue expanding into film and sound more, or are you going to be kind of coming back to photography? What's the future hold for you?
I kind of like took a break from photography, just had to focus on film, but I'm like I plan to work in new photography projects, as well as working on new film projects. So for now, I'm just I'm just in the phase where I'm researching and I'm also looking at different ideas to sort of shape what my next photography project will look like.
I'm curious, like, do you work in a different way in film? Like, do you think we were talking about the photograph as kind of document and truth, and I think your work does play with that in kind of creating this imaginary playing with this idea of reincarnation and things like that. So is your work different, your film work? Does it still kind of play with some of those ideas of truth and recreation, or is it focused on different concepts?
My films are very experimental, so I always want people to be curious when they see any of my films. So they still have the same elements, like from my photography and my film. Like I've said, my film right now are like an extension of what's like my like photography ideas are, just in a moving motion, like a moving picture format.
Okay, so I have another question for you, for both of you to think about. And again, these are all big questions that I've been thinking about for a long time in teaching photography and working as a photographer. I guess my question is, so it's the Flash Photo Festival this month. I will highlight in a few minutes kind of some of the feature exhibitions that folks can check out in addition to yours. But I'm curious, why do we need a photo festival in Winnipeg? We have all these great galleries. A lot of them have all kinds of things going on tonight. But I know in working as a photographer, sometimes I felt like, or I heard in the community, sometimes there's juried exhibitions that photography is not welcome. It's just for painting and things like that. So sometimes photography can kind of feel left out as an art form. And there has been this tension since the early 20th century between fine art, painting, sculpture, things like that, and photography. So why does photography need a festival in Winnipeg? And how does photography fit within art? Or should it be its own category altogether, kind of like with the Flash Photo Festival? I have some thoughts from Leaf on that, but I'll turn to both of you first and see if you have any thoughts.
I can comment on that if you want. I mean, in terms of festivals of any sort, when it comes to photography and art, and that I think festivals like this, like the Flash one, are great because they're so broad and democratic. Anyone who wants to can participate in it, and that's important. It's an important foot in the door for newcomers, for people who don't know how to start out in kind of showing their work, exhibiting their work, breaking into kind of an art space and that. And I think opportunities like this, where anyone can find a place to host an exhibit and show their work, are an excellent starting point and an excellent way to get work seen. Because although I came to the art world through the editorial, there are it is a difficult arena to break into. There are gatekeepers and there are obstacles. It's hard to get a grant without an exhibition. It's hard to get an exhibition without a grant to produce the work. And there's kind of these, like, once you get that foot in the door, you can kind of get the ball rolling. But there are barriers, and festivals like this and things like that kind of break down some of those barriers and allow a lot more people to get out there and get their work shown. And I think that's great. That's better for photography. It's better for art. We need as much diversity and as many different people showcasing different stories, different visions of art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I spoke with Leif Norman, the founder of the Flash Photo Festival, and he talked about same thing that you did, Tim, where bringing artists up from the roots, I think is how he put it, and helping people who want to take their art more seriously and find those venues and things like that. But I was also really interested that this year Flash Photo Festival had kind of both options. They had the open exhibition option, which is what it's always been. Anyone can participate. And then they had the juried feature exhibitions as well. And so I was curious about that. And I asked Leif about it. And he said, I hope it's not taken as exclusionary, but an exciting feature of the festival. If we want to be bold about it, we could say that getting into a club with a VIP section is more exciting than a party without any bouncers at all. So I thought it was a really interesting way to also kind of, like you said, give artists who want to take their work more seriously and get that foot in the door a way to have some higher profile. Do you have any thoughts, Iyuna? What is it? What does it mean to you to be one of the featured emerging artists at the Flash Photo Festival?
I think it's great. It's also like a great opportunity to show my work. I think this is the first time I'm showing my work in almost 2 years or in 18 months. I remember I did a show in Platform, I think in 2019 or 2020, I'm not sure. But this is like the first time in almost 2 years I'm showing my work. So it is, exciting. It is, very good. I hope people go out to see, my work and like other people's work. Because I believe everyone's work is like amazing. So people should check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I should say you can check out the Flash Photo Festival online, of course, for all the listings. They have some programs printed at the Winnipeg Architecture Foundation. I know you can pick them up, I think at 245 Portage as well, lots of different places. But the other featured exhibitions are Sky Callow, and their exhibition Revisiting is at Handsome Daughter. That was curated by Diana Thornycroft. There's Jerry Yom, Family and Survival at 354 Portage, and Colin Corneau at, his exhibition is Faith and Ritual at the Gas Station Theater. So you can check out flashfest.net for all the details about all the different exhibitions, including the open exhibitions that are going on. I also mentioned that Flash Photo Festival teamed up with Winnipeg Architecture Foundation and Storefront Manitoba to create Design Month Winnipeg. So you can check out designmonthwpg.com for all those details, because I bet there's all kinds of great things going on. I know what I was gonna ask Iyuna. I was just looking at your work that was flashing up there a moment ago and thinking how it's kind of a great fit for Tara Davis Studio, because there's so many colors and textures and amazing things going on in that shop as well as in your work. So can you talk to that a little bit? What draws you to these different patterns and colors and textures that are going on, and what do you hope people get from them, or what do you hope they're creating in the images?
I think like patterns are very important. In like I would say like where I'm from, most of like I guess like what shows like class and like elegance is like how great the pattern of the dress is. So and people back in the day used to use like clothes with like patterns as like backdrops. So and they used to be very colorful. So it's sort of like a reference from old photography studios, mainly in West Africa.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think when we were talking, you mentioned Samuel Fosso was one of your photo heroes. For those who aren't familiar with who that is, do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Samuel Foster is an artist, photographer. He's from Nigeria, but he started his art practice in Central African Republic. I think it was just 20. I think he was 20, and when he started, I think when he was younger, it couldn't work. So because of that, his parents sort of left him with his grandparents, and during that time there was like a civil war. So he had to leave Cameroon. He had to leave Nigeria, and then he went to Cameroon, and then he finally settled in Central African Republic because the war did not spill over to that country. So when he was in, so when he was there, sort of his his grandfather took him to a native doctor, and they sort of rearranged his bones, I believe, and so he could. So like after that, he started like to work, and then he used photography because he started photography around that time. So he used photography to document like his progress, and he would send the pictures to his mom and his grandmother to see like the progress that he has made. And then his work got to some French creators that came to Senegal, and they saw his work, and they took his work to France, and he had his like first exhibition in Senegal and in France. So it was from there he sort of got like a break into the art space. And then afterwards, in the 70s and the 80s, he made a lot of self-portrait series of like greats like African like heroes, and it mainly he had a series that was mainly about the civil rights of the civil rights activists. I think that's like one of his most popular self-portrait series. He also has a series of him as Mao. I think that's also very popular too. So he's just a self-portrait artist. But sort of like when I found his work, I was like really inspired by his work. And I would say like his work sort of gave me like clarity to explore the things to explore the ideas I already had.
Yeah, I definitely see some crossover. And again, it's interesting thinking about, like Tim had said, the democratic kind of nature of photography, right? He just picked it up. It was him sending photos to his mom and his family across a distance, right? And I think we still use photography as that bridge across distances, this way to say this happened, right? It's truth. Look, it's in a photograph. And that's why one of the really interesting things that we can play with in photography as artists. There was a question. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. So there was a question. Is there anywhere we can see your films, Iyunade? And you said, my films are on video. So, or on Vimeo, sorry, I said video. So I can see if we can share a link to that if you have one, Iyuna. But
Yes, I can pull up the link.
Yeah, so we'll get the link posted for you. Thank you for the question. And for those tuning in, if you have any other questions, just find the join the chat button under your video screen and send them our way. In the meantime, I will go back to my list of questions here. So I think we've talked about it a little bit, but I am really interested in what draws you to photography. And actually maybe, so Iyuna, we talked a little bit about what you're working on next. Tim, do you want to talk about a little bit about what you're working on next? And maybe, I know you do editorial work too. So is it different? Like, do you approach things differently now, having kind of art project, long-term projects, and then editorial one-off kind of projects?
Yeah, it's absolutely different how I approach editorial work. Typically is, I mean, I guess this was kind of editorial work too, but it's long-term is so much different because, and personal work is so different because you can do it at your own pace. At the end of the day, I'm in 100% control of this work. Editorial work, I'm juggling time constraints, deadlines, other assignments. Everything is typically much more rushed. And occasionally I get to work on long-term projects through editorial work too, and that's nice. But having a personal project that you have 100% ownership and control over, and that you can go back to as much as you want over and over again until you think it's perfect, it's great being able to do that work solely for yourself as opposed to for a client. I love the freelance work and the editorial work I do for the Branded Sun and things like that. But it is different being able to take on work that is purely your own and you can put out in any way you choose. And just some of this, I mean, the scrolling through some of these pictures right now, I mean, the advantage that I've had in this work and what 13 years brings to a body of work is time itself. You know, like I'm watching kids grow up. I'm watching people get married. Unfortunately, going to funerals and things like that. You're seeing the passage of time, and that shows in the photos. So I have photos of kids who are now adults, and I've been able to document them throughout their growth in that, and I just get to be around for a lot of amazing things that I wouldn't be around for if I didn't have the luxury of just spending a lot of time going back again and again and again.
Do you think, does photography bring something different or extra to that experience and that passage of time? Like I know Barth has talked about the uncanny moment and this punctum, like being wounded by a photograph. And, you know, looking at that photograph of a moment that has passed and won't again, and people who might have passed. And I'm thinking, you know, painters have certainly painted the same subject over time and returned to the same subject, but is it different looking at a photograph that has that kind of indexical quality to it?
I think for me, it's kind of holding on to something that's otherwise fleeting. It's kind of like proof that that this moment existed. You know, like a really fleeting world where life is brief, it's short, time passes quickly, and you know, like we're all so busy that like we're not stopping to. I mean, at least I'm not stopping to appreciate moments, but I guess I use the camera to kind of slow things down and hold on to these moments as kind of proof that they didn't pass by without me missing them, I guess.
Yeah, you're literally freezing it in the frame.
Yeah, yeah, and I do like so many of these moments, you know, bring back great memories and that, and I want to hold on to it.
Yeah, well, and I always think with photographs, it's this interesting thing because I don't know anymore if I remember the memory or if I remember the photograph of the memory, right? But it also makes me think of Iyuna's work where you talked about Iyuna, those moments, right, where when you came to these big moments in life, you had to take the photograph and send it home, right? But then in your personal history, you didn't have any photographs of your extended family. You didn't have those photographs of the past. And so you had this really interesting desire to kind of recreate them and create this imaginary narrative for yourself. Is that fair? Do you think that's true? Like, is photography the only medium that could have done that for you?
I would say why photography, why photography is like the medium I used was because when I started, I was just only taking pictures really, and I felt like it was only like photography that could I guess exactly capture what was like capture my ideas, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that you're saying capture your ideas, not create your ideas. Or, you know, if you were painting your ideas, you wouldn't say capture your ideas the same way. So that speaks to the nature of photography as well. Are there any other questions? We're coming towards the end of our talk tonight, but does anyone out there listening have any questions for our two guests this evening? It's the join the chat button at the bottom of your screen if you want to ask anything. Okay. Either of our guests, do you have anything else you wanted to say about your work? I know we kind of went through the slideshows at the beginning, but. Okay, I'm sure you probably want to get to the openings too tonight.
I'd love to say something about Iyunade's work if we could pull up a couple photos. I mean, I just love it. I love the patterns. I mean, obviously I see similarities with because I love the patterns on the Hutterite women's dresses and that, but like just the backgrounds and the patterns in the foreground and the background. I just think this work is so beautiful and I love it. I love.
Thank you so much.
In some of the frames, like the intelligent imperfectness of a couple. I think it's another set of self-portraits that come up where you purposely have these ones here, where you purposely have just like a little bit of the wall showing in that and the end of like the fabric in that. Like I just love it. It's like that's something that if I was photographing as like a documentary photographer, I would have that side in the wall accidentally because I'm terrible with like looking at my sides
the frames,
and stuff but to frame it like perfectly like that and intentionally in that, I just love it. I love the patterns and the color, and I really want to see this work in person, like actual prints of it at the exhibition and that, because I know it's just gonna pop and look absolutely beautiful. I just love like the portraits, the backgrounds, the color. It's just gorgeous work. This is one of the emerging artists. I mean, if this is emerging, then I mean, like, man, I wish I had worked like this when I was quote unquote emerging. I just can't wait to see more. This is outstanding.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
I noticed that too, Iyuna, that the strip of the wall in the background and things like that that could easily be cropped out, but you left it in. And I thought it was so smart because it was showing your hand in it too, right? Like it's not an old photograph; it's one that you've created. But I was actually going to ask, where do you find inspiration? Like where do you find all these interesting fabrics and textures and patterns? Are they, ones that you've had or that family have sent to you, or is it, where do they come from?
Like most of them come from Fabric Land. And like I feel like fabric, like anytime I go to Fabric Land, it's like it's like the place where I get some of my ideas. I just need to go to Fabric Land and look at like the patterns they have, and I don't know, something would just like come up, So I like going to Fabric Land, even when I don't get anything. I just want to see patterns. I want to see the lines. I want to see boxes. I want to see like circles on fabric. And sometimes it just like sort of opens my mind to see, a lot more that I'm probably not thinking about. So most of all of the fabric is from Fabric Land. Some of the things I wore are from like my country, and some other things are from I would say they're from like thrifting. So sometimes I go thrifting and I find something cool, and I just wait until I can use them in like I always wait until I can use them in a photograph or in a film. So I just go around and collect random items and see if they can be useful for my practice, or if I could just keep them.
So then what comes first, the idea for the photograph or the fabric that you have on hand, or that you find, that you come across, that then inspires the image?
Sometimes it could be the fabric first, and sometimes it could be the idea.
Awesome. So do you have any good finds that you're inspired to work on next?
I haven't been to Fabric Land in a while, so I need to go back soon to get new stuff, and to also just look around and see if there are new options.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, because I've shop at Fabricland every once in a while, and I think every time I'm in Fabricland, I see Hutterite women buying fabric, presumably for dresses, like Tim said. So this was a really interesting and kind of delightful connection that I hadn't anticipated. But if there are no further questions, and I should give you space. Anyone have anything else to add? Any last minute thoughts for each other? Okay, then I will wrap things up and let everyone get to openings and other exhibitions and things like that, because there are so many great things going on tonight. But thank you, Tim. Thank you, Iyuna, so much for sharing your thoughts tonight. I know I put you through the ringer with some big questions. So thank you for sharing your work and your time and your thoughts with me and with our First Fridays audience. And watch for the podcast to come out and share it in other places. And please definitely join us again next month when Seuss will be back with another art talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.